We come to our first keynote of the day, Emerging Bangladesh and Challenges Ahead. The financial sector of Bangladesh has grown in terms of organizations, institutions, and experts, and subsequently investment in the private sector that has enhanced giving a surge to the economy. However, there are still areas of challenges to be met to sustain the performance of the sector, which has reflected through efficiency and other indicators. Now I take the privilege of inviting our first keynote. He has an experience of over 3 decades in 4 geographies, unlike many with a background of financial consultant, major roles as CEO of local and foreign banks, and senior management positions in financial industry. He is none other than Mr. A M Majedur Rahman, Managing Director, Dhaka Stock Exchange Limited. Sir, may I invite you to the stage, please?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A lot has been said about me, but I can only say that I'm one of the practitioners like you in the financial industry. I don't want to say much about what can be done about the economy of Bangladesh. I'll leave it to the audience. I'll just present some of the statistics and give you some insights from my own experience. Mr. Ali Reza Iftikhar, as well as the MC, has mentioned a lot about the economy. I can say from my own experience, I left the country once and I came back only because I understood there are opportunities which one should exploit and help his own country. With these few words, I would invite you to the day-long session on the challenges, what we should be getting into and what we should be really recommending for the overall growth of Bangladesh. I don't know if you can see in your screen. You can, right, not a problem. I mean, I think you can have a copy of the slides in your email addresses. With a population of 165 million people, and in a very densely populated arena, Bangladesh has been striving as to what can be done from a title of basket case to an emerging economy. You see, the per capita income in the last decade, or a bit more than 1 decade, 2 decades, it has grown to 8% plus. I don't want to repeat the statements made by Pricewaterhouse or Standard Chartered Bank or even the Asian Development Bank, where we will be driving to. But this is a reckoner for us to realize where we can really put our country to. In the map of the world, Bangladesh is now dubbed as a role model. In short, if I can just remind you, it's now treated as the 34th largest economy of the world. It's the second largest in RMG sector. We have export of $40 billion plus, and opportunities are, with the trade war between China and US, we have all the potentials to develop our RMG sector. And we as professionals in the financial world, I think we can help our industries in a much better way in helping them to achieve a higher growth rate. We are 53rd in imports. This is a point to appreciate. Our exports are based on raw material imports from the rest of the world. And this is where we have done a wonderful example of building our own supply chain. And that is where the success has been deeply embedded in reducing our imports from a $50 billion case to $44 billion in the last financial year. We are still dependent on imports, and of course, the gap between the exports and imports, the current account balance is sometimes in our favor and sometimes it goes down. It doesn't matter as long as our reserves are plenty to help in terms of our national need. We have a beautiful reserve of $34 billion, which has been steady in the recent times. And that's something that the world communities really appreciate. Now, what has been the driving force in the composition of our GDP? We were an agricultural country. The agricultural input was the last resort that we thought in terms of our livelihood. Now it has changed to industries and the service sector. And for the service sector, I think the people in this room are largely responsible, and we must acknowledge their contribution. In the industries, it's the private sector and the corporates. The government has given us a policy framework, but it's the initiatives of the private sector which has come up to this stage. The main drivers of the economy has been the investment rate, the savings rate, and the contribution to GDP of the people in Bangladesh. There was a time we could hardly draw a curve to show what has been the investment rate, what has been the savings. But wonderful, this is a story where we are really proud of. I'm not getting into the numbers, I'm sure you know the numbers, but I'm just reminding you the fundamentals which have helped our economy to come up to this stage. And of course, that's where the challenges are for us to make our new contributions. Labor force participation. There was a time we hardly thought of the women folk in our industry or service sector. Let me tell you from another example of my own life. I was employed abroad, and once I came back home to visit my village, and I was really surprised to see that the women riding motorbikes were helping in social service. And today, we are really proud that our government sector is mainly supported by the women of our communities. The other factor that we must take into account is our demographics. Our population in the age bracket between 25 and 40 contributed the 40% of our workforce. And it is estimated in the next 40 years, this population, the demography will be our asset. So we have moved from an agricultural country to urbanization. I remember in my childhood, I used to see a board proudly shown by the government sectors saying, আমরা গ্রামগুলো কেমন ভাবে গড়ে তুলছি যে আপনি গ্রামে ফিরে আসবেন। এখন আমাদের গ্রামগুলোর চিত্র হয়ে গেছে, they are no more a village with poor, the deprived, no medical care, no communication. But if you go to your villages, you will see what a beautiful example of growth, and which has been mainly done by the people themselves. Teledensity is another factor. We hardly have had a phone at home or office. Even if we had one, there was always a complaint that the line drops, or there was a communication very poor, not being able to connect to the person we wanted to call to. Today, we have a very good example of people using mobile phones for their business needs as well as communication. The poverty rate has come down from as high as 74% to 25% in the recent years. The GDP, you all know about it. I don't think I have to speak about it anymore. We are only in the subcontinent slightly behind India, and which I'm sure we will be catching up very soon. Inflation. There was a time, just 20 years back, we were worried what item of our daily life was going to be a problem for us to buy again. Milk, sugar, oil, fish, rice, whatever. We always had a worry. Fortunately, nowadays, these are no more in your points of worries. You are rather thinking of what more can be done to contain inflation. And it's the success of the government that we have been able to contain it below 6%. You in the financial industry know very well that the loans to the private sector is the key consideration of the government policy, as well as in the industry, you think of what's your credit growth rate. This has been largely to the industrial sector, and not only the industrial sector. In the consumer financing industry, there has been a sea change, and people are really able to improve their lifestyle. Consumer spending, it shows the lifestyle in the table of world economic indicators. Bangladesh has achieved a lot in health, in social conditions, even in age. Now we can expect to live 72 years at least, which was less than 60 years, just about 2 decades back. This is a story that we had been through several crises in the last 2 decades. There were cyclones, there were floods, there were global financial crises. But look at the curve, the GDP growth rate, the economic indicators, the development ratio, everything registering an upward curve. These all mean that we have a very resilient people. And that's our, I would say, the main asset. And looking forward, I would say that the people of Bangladesh, the private sector, the corporates, they are going to make a change. If we talk about the problems that we have, we go out of this room, we have traffic congestion. We go to our industries, we see the sustainability is yet to take place. Several issues to address. And that's where we see the opportunities. If you talk about traffic congestion, I would say the solution is the metros, the undergrounds. And if you think about it, the financing, the budgeting, we all have the people. We all have the resources. We have the people. We have the leadership. Let me give you one example. Dhaka Stock Exchange was looking for a strategic investor since a long time. we had very lukewarm response. But the moment we could show the opportunities, the challenges, the success case, you will not believe I had interests from 38 potential bidders from all over the world. And you know the story, how successfully we have completed this transaction last year. I should also bring to you another example. Think of Eastern Bank Limited 20 years back. How have they come today? They have proudly advanced their portfolio to an extent where they are compared as one of the best banks in Bangladesh, beating the multinationals. With this, viewers, ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave the day to you to address the challenges of our economy, and I'm sure you'll find it a good opportunity for us to rethink and draw on the board our roadmap for the next decade or so. And lastly, before I conclude, I will thankfully acknowledge Najmuz Ahmed, for inviting me to this forum and giving me an opportunity to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Majedur Rahman. I'm requesting you to stay back in the stage, sir. I would like to call Managing Director, Eastern Bank Limited, Mr. Ali Raza Iftekhar, at the stage to hand over the crest to Mr. A M Majedur Rahman. Also, Mr. Najmush from Lighthouse. Sir, I would like to come, please invite you on the stage. Thank you again, Mr. Majedur Rahman, Mr. Ali Raza Iftekhar, and Mr. Najmush for being on the stage.